I started producing my podcast last year. I didn't know much about it. In fact, besides listening to other podcasts, there was nothing much to it. And I remember thinking that it is probably a very easy thing to do. All I needed to do is record an interview, do some minor editing, and upload it on the platform. Pretty easy, right? No, not really. Many things influence the quality of the podcast, and I may have made countless mistakes along the way. But more I learned, more I started to understand. So let's talk about 5 of them today. The first thing I learned is that it is not about producing content. For most people, a podcast is just another form of content. They want to record the podcast, chop it up in multiple bite-sized pieces, and use it for their social media. But in my experience, thinking that way was quite distracting. It could have severely limited my conversations with my guests, because doing that means our questions become more focused on producing sound bites rather than genuinely understanding someone's point of view. I think content can be the byproduct, not the main goal. Once we are on a quest like a podcast or something similar, usually we start checking around for some advice and inspiration. But many people emphasize too much on gear and equipment, whether it was cameras, fancy microphones, headsets, and so on. The thing is, less is more. Minimal equipment is good enough. With less equipment, I had to bother less about technicalities. I was able to focus more on conversation, learning, and understanding the next person. It also meant that my guests or I didn't have to go through a long ordeal of setting things up for inordinate amount of time. The third thing that was put to the test was adaptability. Talking about adaptability is one thing, but things get real when the rubber hits the road, and that's when we can truly practice adaptability. And as life goes, not every interview went to the plan. Sometimes it was due to the time constraints, and sometimes it was due to mismatch of objectives. So being flexible and steering the conversation to make the most out of it was more sensible. If I had remained adamant about how I wanted the conversation to go, I would have ended with nothing, or worse, a helter-skelter conversation. It is easy to fall into the trap of content creation and just keep producing podcast after podcast after podcast. But listening to my own podcast and reflecting on what I heard was highly useful for 2 reasons. First, I could spot my little mistakes and improve upon them continuously. Second, I could absorb those learning at a much deeper level and quote them when applicable. And doing that helped me increase my knowledge base. It also helped to increase the body of knowledge on that subject. And finally, the 5th thing I learned was not to be transactional. This is the key one, because I find that some people are more interested in clocking the count of podcasts they appear on. It may very well be their goal, but I feel that when 2 people talk, we should have a conversation. I reckon success can be achieved with one conversation at a time. Because in the end, meaningful relationships and connections do matter. And to get to those connections, we need meaningful conversations. So if you want to get to the core of what someone is really about, then ask them this one question. What is the most important conversation of your life? Being less transactional and more conversational is the key. I was very fortunate because the podcast had an audience from over 59 countries and 383 cities to this date. And it is growing slowly but steadily. So considering all the learning and experience, I feel better than before. And very soon I will be producing another season of the ICT podcast. The podcast is all about innovation, communication, technology, and everything that converges on them. I will bring you more tips, more stories, more perspectives, and insights so you can improve various aspects of your life. Until then,